Now let's start with the newsletter registration. For this, we have the newsletter registration component in the input folder, and there we're sending this HTTP request. Now I want to show the pending notification whilst we are sending and waiting for the response. I want to show the success notification if sending succeeded, and I want to show the error notification if sending failed. Now to make all of that happen, in the newsletter registration component, we need to connect to context. And we do that with the useContext hook, as you learned. So here we then call useContext, and we simply import the notification context. So again, not the provider, but the context itself from our store, and there the notification context file. And then we establish this connection as we did it before a couple of minutes ago. So here we then have our notification context. But here I'm not interested in the notification. Here instead I want to call a function to show the notification. For example, here in the registration handler when we start sending this request. Right before we do send it, I want to show a notification that is in the pending status that says something like signing up. So for this, we can use the notification context object and call show notification and pass an object with the notification data. And here I'll set a title of signing up, a message of registering for newsletter, something like this, and set the status here to pending, because we are pending. Now, if we are successful, so in this last then block here, then I want to set the notification to success. So in here, I'll actually call show notification again, but then say success as a title, and as a text here, we can say successfully registered for newsletter, something like this. And the status is success instead of pending. Now, in case of an error, I also want to show the appropriate notification, and that's why I will add a catch method here, where we get a potential error. And here, I also want to show a notification, but the status will be error, the title will be error, and the message could be retrieved from the error. Here we could check if we have a message property which we want to use, and alternatively just say something went wrong. So we show the error message if we have it, or we show this fallback if there is no message attached to the error. Now, one problem we'll have here is that the fetch function works such that error HTTP codes, so 400 and 500 status codes, will not cause this promise to fail. So we will not make it into this catch block if we have an error status code. And I would like to make it into this catch block if that's the case. So to make sure that this is how everything works, I will actually dive into this then block and check if response is okay. This is an extra field which this response object has. And if that's the case, I know that we have a success status code. Then I want to return response.json. If that's not okay though, if we make it past this if check, then I know that we have an error. In this case, I also want to get my response data, but I also want to throw an error. I want to reject that promise by throwing an error inside of the then block. And for that here, when using then catch instead of async await, we'll need a nested promise because I'll need to get access to the response object whilst getting access to the parsed data at the same time. So here I'll then call response.json as well, but I'll not return it, but instead here in the then block, I know that we're already in the error case because we're past this if check. Here I will then throw a new error with a message which I get from my data. Here I'll check if I got a message in my response, which I got back from the server, and I'll use that as an error message if I have one. Otherwise, I'll set a fallback here as well. Something went wrong. And now here I'll return this promise chain, this nested promise chain, which will throw an error if things go wrong. And this will then cause the outer promise chain, the main promise chain started by fetch, to reject as well with that error passed along, so that we make it into this catch block if we do have an error. So with all that implemented, we can try if this works. If we save everything and I reload, if I sign up for my newsletter here and I click register, we see the signing up notification and it changes to success. It never disappears. We'll work on this later. For the moment, it's always there. Now let's test it with an error. And for this, I'll dive into my dbutil.js file and break my MongoDB credentials again, so that connecting to the database and inserting data will fail. If I do that and I try the same request again, we start with pending, but then we go to the error case and we see that error message at the bottom. Now it's of course up to you if you want to show that error message here. I'm doing it and everything works the way it should work here. And with that, I'll change the credentials back to working credentials and we're good. Now, of course, it would also be good if the notification could be removed and if it would disappear eventually.